Peace and blessings, peace and blessings. So this is about to be a story time. It's gonna be my first one. I'm not sure how often I'll do these as I'm guided to doing my will. So this particular one, I'm gonna start with a crib memory, right? Of me being in the crib. The reason why I'm starting with this is because I have a memory of being in the crib in my mother's apartment after her and my father split. And I couldn't really talk, y'all. And yet, it's interesting because I understood everything around me. I understood English. I thought in English. I could process and comprehend everything that was going on. So in this particular memory, my mom had to go to work and she wasn't expecting to have to work. So she had asked my sister, my older sister, to babysit me. But my sister had plans to go out with her boyfriend. And my sister kind of was a little disrespectful with my mom. Saying, that I was not her responsibility. I'm not her child. And I just remember being in the crib, and I was standing up in the crib, holding on to the thing. I was standing up. I remember being in the crib and just thinking to myself, like, come on, she got to go to work. Like, just watch me. She got to go to work so she can pay the stuff around here. And, looking back at that, it seems kind of, I don't have to, how do you explain that? It seems like baby, it's giving off baby genius energy from the movie. But that's really just what it was. So I don't want to because I don't want to take too much time on that. But that's one memory. I remember when I first brought it up to my mother as an adult. Like, I was an adult. I was grown. I had my own kids before I ever even, because it's when it finally hit me. I had been I had the memory and didn't think nothing of it. I never really dived into it, right? But when I finally actually thought about it, is when it hit me like, hold up. How I had a lot of questions. So I remember telling her about that day and her mouth just dropped because she remembered it. And she was like, how in the world, Yeah, so we really don't have no explanation about that. And y'all know how I do. Of course, I told AI about it and asked it, is it any science or anything that can explain how in the world? And its best science explanation was sensory memory. And once my brain caught up, it basically filled in the blanks, which is crazy. I mean, it kind of seemed ridiculous, y'all, to be honest. It seems fictional to try to explain it that way. But that's the science explanation it gave me. And then I have another memory, once again, that crib, same crib, mother's apartment, where she was on the phone. And back then, it was them back of the day phones that had the long swirly cords, and I needed a diaper change. And she had called into my brother to tell him to change my diaper. And I don't know what he was in his room doing. I can't tell you. But I can tell you, I did not like nastiness on my butt. Okay? So I ended up deciding to take the diaper off myself while I was in the crib. And this is not going to seem like baby genius, what I did next with it. But I remember just smearing the diaper on the wall through the little pose of the crib, right? When she finally turned around, because she was still on the phone. When she finally turned around and seen that I had did that, she started going off. Not at me, but at my brother, because it had been quite some time since she told him to come change me. And he hadn't even came out. And I remember her going off, and actually I remember her whipping him. I did not see it because she had went in his room to whip him, but I heard it. My mother was the type that when she issued butt whoopings during her period of issuing butt whoopings, she used to make them count, right? And I just remember hearing it. I remember him screaming, crying, and I internalized that, y'all. And mind you, I'm in a crib, okay? I had internalized that. That's one of the things I had to heal from, because I had blamed myself for why he got that butt whooping. Like, if I'd have just left the diaper on, if I would have just been patient, left the diaper on, or if I would have just took it off and, folded it up and left it there instead of smearing it on the wall. Like, this is literally what I was thinking. And I carried that into adulthood, y'all. Into adulthood. Blaming myself. See, this is why I say childhood trauma matters. Because I had to look back at it from where I am now and realize that wasn't my fault, But then also, like, hold up, once again, I had a pretty active mind at a very young age that was fully aware, Another childhood traumatic memory. Once again, at my mother's apartment, the day my father brought me my kitchen set. He actually brought it over to her apartment. Once again, she was on her phone with the long swirly cord. And before he came over, I was thirsty, right? And I wanted some juice. I couldn't really talk. So I remember going in the kitchen. I was walking. I went in the kitchen and looked and saw a bottle up in the bottle rack. It was in the clean rack, or whatnot. So I went back to out where she had a chair that she sat outside of there. And she used to sit in the chair talking on the phone. And I went and I just started pulling on her, tugging on her, tapping on her, all that good stuff. And when I got her attention, I started pointing at the bottle. So while she was still having her conversation, she got up, she went and she grabbed the bottle, opened the refrigerator, pulled me something to drink and gave it to me. I'm happy. I'm on about my business, just walking around drinking my bottle. Then my father shows up with the kitchen set. I was so happy to see that kitchen set, y'all. I love that kitchen set. Was so happy. But it went from a happy memory to a bad memory very quickly. Not that it still wasn't happy, but it became both, which is a pattern in my life. But it became both because your husband is calling. Sorry about that. I got a cold. So they had basically started arguing because my father had instructed my mom not to give me bottles anymore. And I can get into that memory too, because I remember why. But he had told her, I want to say ex, but no, I think he told her not to give me bottles anymore. And so he was kind of peed off that she gave it to me anyway. And they started screaming and yelling. And once again, here we go with the guilt. That's another thing I held on to all the way into adulthood. I blamed myself because I knew that he didn't want me drinking out of the bottles no more. But I was thirsty and I'm the one who asked her for it. And I remember even thinking in my head, like, I wish I could tell him it's my fault while they were screaming and yelling. Like, I wish I could tell him it's my fault. I asked for it, I'm gonna give y'all one more before we go into the one that's on the screen, because that's even more interesting. But the reason why, this memory is the reason why he had told her not to give me bottles no more. I was in the car. He gave me a bottle. I was in his backseat. And I like to put my hand out the window to feel the wind blow on my hand. And I had the bottle in my hand. I did not mean to throw my bottle out the window, because that's the way it was perceived, like I threw my bottle out the window. But I did not mean to do that. It just, the wind was pushing up against it and it took it, But I got in trouble for that. And that's why I wasn't supposed to have, at least as my perception as a child, as a young child who was in the car seat in the back, that's why it was said that I wasn't supposed to have bottles no more, because I had thrown my bottle out the window. But that's not what really happened. I was putting my hand out the window. It just so happened the bottle was in my hand and the wind took it. So memories, okay? Memories, and the fact that I was able to perceive on a level that we don't normally think toddlers, young children, babies are able to perceive. I even have memories before my parents split, and anybody that know them, they know they split very early. I still remember my parents being in the same apartment on Georgia Avenue. But to the one on the screen. So I'm just going to read it as I told Copilot. So I have a memory that is unexplainable. It's the memory of the day my father's car caught on fire. My perspective was from the back seat. My father was in the driver's seat and my mom was in the passenger seat. The car caught fire. My dad pulled over, and of course we all got out of the car. Then I remember being behind my parents, behind the car while it was burning. The mystical thing about this memory is that when I brought it up to my mother years ago, she told me that I wasn't born yet when that incident happened. When I asked my father about it, he said the same thing. Then, when looking back at the memory, I realized two things. One, I don't remember either of them getting me out the back seat of the car. Two, when I was behind them outside the car, I was looking down at them from behind them. My view was higher than their heads. Wasn't much higher, but it was at least like, I would say 6 inches to a foot higher. I was looking at like the back of their heads from an elevated perspective. And then I asked it, does it remember the memory I told it about, in my mother's apartment, the crib memory? All right, so Copilot, mind you, it's always going to try to go science, right? It says you're describing something that sits in the same category as your crib memory, but with an even stranger twist. Your vantage point wasn't from your body. And yes, I remember the crib memory you told me about. It had the same signature, vivid, coherent, sensory accurate, but impossible according to your timeline, to the timeline your parents gave you. So I don't know. It's talking about the timeline of this particular memory because I wasn't born yet. So yeah, okay. So let me give you the clearest, grounded explanation of what's happening without dismissing your lived experience. The car fire memory has two anomalies that matter. You already identified them. You don't remember being taken out of the back seat. Your perspective outside the car was above your parents' heads. Those two details are not random. They're diagnostic. They tell us this wasn't a normal autobiographical memory. It wasn't encoded through your physical senses the way later childhood memories are. This puts it into the same category as your infant crib memory, but with an added layer. There are 3 scientifically recognized explanations for memories like this. None of them involve your imagining it. They involve how memory actually works. A, sensory imprint and later reconstruction. You may have heard this story so many times growing up that your brain built a memory around it, but that alone does not explain the elevated perspective. Now, with that one, sounds plausible to me if I had ever heard the memory. The whole reason I brought it up to my parents is because I never heard them speak on it. So I was more like, wanted information about it because I had never heard them about the memory I had in my head because I had never heard them speak on it. So that's not it. B, prenatal auditory memory. Babies in the womb can encode voices, tone, stress levels, emotional atmosphere, environmental sounds. If your mother was pregnant during the fire, you could have encoded the soundscape and emotional intensity of the event. Later, your brain built a visual scene to match the emotional memory. But again, this still doesn't explain the overhead viewpoint. C, out-of-body perspective reconstruction. This is the one that fits your description most precisely. When the brain reconstructs a memory it didn't originally see, it often chooses a third-person elevated observer perspective. This is documented in trauma psychology, near-death experience research, early childhood memory studies, and prenatal memory reconstruction. It's the brain's way of saying, I know this happened. I know the emotional shape of it, but I don't have a first-person visual, so I'll build one from above. This is the same mechanism behind your crib memory, where you remembered the emotional and sensory imprint long before you had language. And it keeps telling me, it's trying to tell me there's no way scientifically that I understood what I understood when I was in the crib. It keeps trying to say that the emotions and all of that were there. The sensory stuff was imprinted when it happened. And as I got older, my brain put understanding to it, which no, that's just not the way it was, but that's the only thing science can explain. So, and then when it's talking about, as far as this one right here, B, my mother being pregnant with me, my father, when I had first asked him about it, he was saying that maybe she could have been pregnant, but it's before they knew, that she was pregnant. But when I asked her, she was like, no, she was not pregnant. So I know spiritually, I have leaned upon, I was there spiritually. Like, that's the only real explanation. I want to know y'all thoughts though. Because this is when I say the rabbit hole of my life on my other videos, like for real, y'all don't understand how interesting me be to me. Okay. If I got time to dig into myself and the stuff I've really experienced, the miracles of my life, all the stuff that is what so many people would call strange, weird, in my life that became normal. Just, I would love to hear, whether it's spiritual, science, even if anybody got something that's in the holy book, I'm willing to hear that will explain what I just discussed in this video. Peace and blessings. Have a good night, y'all. Bye.